So we are in Ezra, the 4th chapter, and last week we got into a little bit of a preview of this chapter. We read 1 through 5, and we noted that in doing so, if we were to read 1 through 5 and then jump right to the end of the chapter, we would be moving fluently through time. In fact, in verse 5, we see that the adversaries bribed counselors to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. If we come back to verse 24, then the work on the house of God that is in Jerusalem stopped, and it ceased until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So it's worth noting, that time break. And what we have in the middle of this chapter is how that took place. So where we're at in Ezra, we have come back to Jerusalem. And the first thing we did in chapter 3, right around 50, chapter 2, right around 50,000 people have come back. Who's their leader? Kind of two people. Zerubbabel, which means planted in Jerusalem, right? Planted in Babylon. We'll get there. And then Yeshua or Joshua is the other leader. So the first thing they do when they get back is they build the temple, and then wow, I'm struggling just because I can't hear. I guess I can't think tonight either. They build the altar, start offering sacrifices. And we noted that when they did that they were fearful of their inhabitants. We're starting to get these warning signs, right? That things are going well, but there's some undercurrents that are somewhat problematic. And so they're fearful of the inhabitants of the land. And so after they rebuild the altar, they begin to keep their feast. They start with the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths, which was symbolic of the time that they spent in the wilderness. And after that, they started to rebuild the temple. So at the laying of the foundation of the temple, they get together and they have a ceremony just like they did a few hundred years prior, their ancestors that was. But at this great celebration, while there is joyful singing and praising of God, there's also this weeping that takes place in this lamenting over the size of the temple. And so we had a little bit of a warning sign that things aren't all going to go well early in chapter 3 with the fear of the inhabitants. And then at the end of chapter 3, we kind of end with, what's that? Where's it going? And we noted that right off they're getting very focused on the physical side of things. Questions or comments before we get started into chapter 4? Well, let's go ahead. I know we read 1 through 5 last week, but let's go back and read 1 through 6. There are handfuls of names in this reading. Is anyone brave enough to venture through those names for us? I'll pick up there then. Now, when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple to the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' houses and said to them, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Ezra king of Assyria, who brought us here." But Zerubbabel, Yeshua, and the rest of the heads of the fathers' houses in Israel said to them, "You are You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God, but we alone will build to the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus and King of Persia has commanded us. Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build, and tried counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. And in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. So we'll pick up with that accusation in just a moment or two. So what takes place? What's a summary that takes place in these these verses? They're building away and someone comes and says something to them. Very, very discouraging words, right? Yeah, hey, can we help? Very discouraging stuff. How dare they, right? And in fact, they said, we want help. Why? Yeah, they've been worshiping God, your God, right? The God of the Jews all along, just as you do. So we want to help you. And what is the answer that they get? What was that, Dwayne?
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, I'm not even sure there was a thanks in front of the thanks, or no thanks. I think Rita had it down pat. No. In fact, such an emphatic no, you have no part with us. You have no business. You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God. Tricky question. Are they right or are they wrong in this stance, in this response?
You're probably right, because it was just the tribes of Benjamin and Judah that went back to build, which would have been the tribe of Judah, which would have been the pure.
Okay.
Suppose.
So Ernie says they are focusing on keeping their lineage pure, right? We'll come back to that. We have Ernie says they're right. Anyone else?
They were the ones who were actually sent there to do it. If the people there had wanted it, why hadn't they done it before now?
That's a good point. They were sent there to do it. If the inhabitants of the land wanted to do it before, why didn't they do it before? Now let me ask you this, just for sake of muddying the waters, and I mean that sincerely. Are they doing this themselves? What's that?
They received a lot of money from everybody.
They are getting a lot of money from Cyrus and the other Babylonians, aren't they? It's kind of interesting. There's kind of a mark there where you're like, huh, right? Now, I'd reached out, actually, chapter 9, when we see the mass divorce take place. I'd reached out to a preacher, and I'd asked, was that of God or was it not of God? And his response was this: it was messy. And I don't like that response. But I think it's probably the most accurate response. And it was the most accurate, I think, here in chapter 4, too. It was messy. Was it right or was it wrong? I've heard a lot of people present, well, it was right. Some of the reasons it was given, right? They say, hey, exactly what Dwayne said. We were the ones sent here to do this, not you, get lost. They say, we are God's chosen people, get lost, right? These are some of the reasons that they give. Let's ask this question. Was God's chosen people, the Israelite, all about race?
No, they had proselytes.
They had proselytes? Do you think of anyone else? And Joshua? Is it Gibeonites? I think that's what they're called, right? A whole race of people were absorbed into the land. They didn't have equal status, but they were part of the land. Was there anyone that married outside of Israel without condemnation? Lots of kings and Moses, right? Samson's didn't work out so well. Here's another question. Verse 1. Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that they returned, and the exiles were building a temple. Were they adversaries before this point? Or is this how they became adversaries? It's a good question, isn't it? I think you'll probably think a long time on that one, without coming up with an answer. They want to help, it would seem. We could say that maybe they had bad motives, or this was a pretext to do them harm, but there's no indication of that given whatsoever. So they could have been adversaries from the beginning, or this could have made them adversaries. I tend to lean more towards the latter side of it. This is probably how they became adversaries. In fact, verses 7 through 23 really illustrates that. Let's ask some other questions along these as we evaluate this, and then we'll look at some of the information out of Scripture here. Number one, we've already noted they were receiving help from outside the two tribes, right? Outside the three tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and Levites. Lost my train of... What was my question, Tom? That's what was coming next. Oh, wow. Could have they answered more softly? What does Solomon say about a soft answer? Turn away wrath. You think they could have employed that here? Yeah. Was God's law only for the Jews? No. They were to be a shining light, right? Going clear back to Abraham, they were to be blessed in order to bless all nations, right? Now, was the law for everyone? No, but they're making no effort here, are they, to show that shining light whatsoever. So they give a very, very harsh answer. Let's look at the other side of this as well. In verse 2, the people say, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do. For we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria." Do you think they're telling the truth? the people of the land? Have they been worshiping Jehovah? Someone says no. Any other ideas? Well, this is telling of when Assyria conquered the northern kingdoms, right? Number one, they didn't take everyone out of the land. That's worth noting. They took a lot of people, but they didn't take everyone. There were still people of the Jewish race left in the land. But what else did they do when they took all those people out? What did Assyria do? This is how Samaria becomes Samaria. What's that? Thank you, Tom. They bring other people in, right? If you would turn your Bibles to 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. It's kind of interesting. 2 Kings 17. And this is what the people are talking about. So this would have been more than 70 years prior, because Assyria conquered the northern kingdom prior to Babylon conquering the southern kingdom. Oh, no wonder that didn't look familiar. I was in 1 Kings. 2 Kings 17. Starting in verse 24. The first part of this chapter tells about how the kings were sinful, the people were sinful, and so Assyria conquers them. Starting in verse 24. And the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the people of Israel. And they took possession of Samaria and lived in the cities. And at the beginning of their dwelling there, they did not fear the Lord. Therefore, the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. Kind of an interesting telling there, right? So they say, wait, we better do something about this. This isn't going well. We don't like these lions. So the king of... Verse 26, the king of Assyria was told, the nations that they have carried away and placed in the cities of Samaria do not know the law of the God of the land. Therefore he has sent lions among them, and behold, they are killing them, because they do not know the law of the land, of the God of the land. Then the king of Assyria commanded, send there one of the priests whom you carried away from there, and let him go and dwell there and teach them the law of the God of the land. So one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and lived in Bethel and taught them how they should fear the Lord. But every nation still made gods of its own and put them in the shrines and high places that Samaritans had made, every nation in the cities of which they lived. And so it goes on to tell that. So, did they worship God Almighty? Yeah. Did they worship Him only? No. So, again, I think one part of this story is that it's messy, right? It's easy to say, the Jews were completely right, and the 15 years of being shut down was God's will. We certainly see no indication of that whatsoever. It's easy to say, they're wrong. They should have answered differently, and things would have went differently. They were focused on some of the wrong things, which we can see they absolutely were. It's easy to go either one of those routes. But what is the ultimate meaning of these passages? In other words, what were they pointing to? And I'm going to guide you through this. Is God fulfilling His promises to these people?
He was, they weren't.
Yeah. Someone say something?
I say he was, they weren't.
Okay, yeah, he's fulfilling his promises to them, right? Completely, though? No, not completely. Where's the complete fulfillment of those prophecies come from? Through who? Through Jesus. And hence that phrase that I think fits so well, it's messy. Because the ultimate fulfillment was to be a spiritual fulfillment. And we're going to see that, they're trying and they're doing their level best. And if there's a common theme throughout either of these two books, Ezra and Nehemiah, it's that they get caught up in physical things and doing it by their own might versus spiritually relying on God. Of course, we looked at Zechariah chapter 4, verse 8 last week. Not by will, not by might, but by the Spirit of God. Right? Questions or comments? So, they tell these people, these Samaritans, go get lost. And so the Samaritans take the advice not to help build the temple, right? That much they got clear. But go get lost, they're not about to do, are they? They hired themselves some good attorneys. And with the attorneys, remember verse 6, and they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. What follows, 7 through 16, is a representation of that letter. Does someone want to read that for us? 7 through 16. There are some names in there yet.
And in the days of Artaxerxes wrote Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of their companions unto Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the writing of the letter was written in the Syrian tongue and interpreted in the Syrian tongue. Rehum, the chancellor, and Shimshai, the scribe, wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes, the king of Assur. Then wrote Rehum, the chancellor, and Shimshai, the scribe, and the rest of their companions, the Danites and the Pharsathites, the Tarpalites,
Sorry, Kevin.
the Pharsites, they were far-sighted, I guess. The Pharsites, the Babylonians, the Sushanites, the Dehavites, and the Elamites, and the rest of the nations whom the great and noble Asnapar brought over, and set in the cities of Samaria and the rest that are on this side the river, and at such a time. This is the copy of the letter that they sent unto him, even unto Artaxerxes the king. Thy servants, the men on this side the river, and at such a time. Be it known unto the king that the Jews which came up from thee to us are coming to Jerusalem, building the rebellious and the bad city, and have set up the walls thereof, and joined the foundation. Be it known now unto the king that if this city be builded, and the walls set up again, then will they not pay toll, tribute, and custom, and so thou shalt endamage the revenue of the kings. Now because we have maintenance from the king's palace, and it was not meet for us to see the king's dishonor, therefore have we sent and certified the king, that search may be made in the book of the records of thy fathers, so shall thou find in the book of the records, and know that this city is a rebellious city, and hurtful unto kings and provinces, and that they have moved sedition within the same of old time, for which cause was this city destroyed. We certify the king that if this city be built again, and the walls thereof set up, by this means thou shalt have no portion on this side of the river.
Thank you, Kevin. So, I could have been nice, I guess, and told Kevin to start in verse 11. But so they hire the attorneys that were aforementioned, and they write to Artaxerxes, who is now the king in place of Cyrus. And they say a couple of things. Number one, they say they're building a city in the wall, and they are a rebellious people. They are going to prompt Artaxerxes to go back into the library. I don't think he had Google then, or it wouldn't have taken so long for him to do this. It takes a little bit of time. And so he goes, sends people into the libraries, and does some research, and sure enough finds out that there were some great kings in the lineage of Judah, and they were a mighty people and rebellious, didn't like being ruled by others, and so they very well might quit paying taxes. They're going to do this to separate themselves from the king. And so the people say that if this happens, if they rebuild this city and this wall, you're not going to be paid toll, you're not going to be paid taxes, you're not going to be paid tribute. In fact, they end that part of the letter, or they end the letter with saying, you're not even going to have a land over here. It's going to be taken from you. You're going to lose everything. Now, in verse 14, how many of you have the reading, we eat the salt of the palace? Verse 14. King James reads a little bit different, but literally, in reason, King James takes a little less literal reading here, is because, people don't eat salt much anymore. But we just studied about that on Sunday, right? Salt was very, very valuable. In fact, if you wanted to honor someone and show fellowship to someone, you offered them bread and salt, and it was a way of honoring someone, giving them the very best of your household. And so what they're saying is, we eat the salt of the palace. Our bread is buttered by the palace, they might say. They're giving their motivation, or so they say, their motivation for writing out to them, and say, hey, we just don't want you to come to any harm, because eventually it's going to harm us as well. Questions or comments on that? Let's see what the king does. Before we do so, I want to say hello to Dad, and also Neil, I see, is with us this evening. So, hello, Neil. Would someone read 17 through the end of the chapter, please?
The king sent this reply. The Rahum, the commanding officer, Shimshai the secretary, and the rest of their associates living in Samaria and elsewhere in Trans-Euphrates. Greetings. This letter, the letter you sent us, has been read and translated in my presence. I issued an order, and a search was made, and it was found that this city has a long history of revolt against kings and have been a place of rebellion and sedition. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates, and taxes, tribute, and duty were paid to them. Now issue an order to these men to stop work, so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. Be careful not to neglect this matter. Why let this threat go to the detriment of the royal interest? As soon as the copy of the letter of King Artaxerxes was read to Rahum and Shimshai the secretary and their associates, they went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. Thus the work on the house of God in Jerusalem came to a standstill until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
Thank you. Those names aren't familiar with us, are they? So on the bright side, Wendy, when you mispronounce one, no one knows if you're right or what they were thinking is right. So just keep going with it.
No, I don't know.
Thank you for that. So the king writes back. Bear in mind, they're quite some ways off in Jerusalem. They're writing clear up to Babylon. And the reference is beyond the river, right? And Wendy's translation's making that clear with trans-Euphrates. So across the Euphrates is what they're talking about. And the accusation was, you're going to lose your providence on this side of the Euphrates if you don't watch it. Artaxerxes says, we did an inquiry. Turns out what you said is true. These people are dangerous. Make them stop and don't delay. And so the work stops, comes to a screeching halt for 15 years. 16, 15, 16, depends on who's accounting and counting you are looking at. Good day? No, not a good day. Not a good day at all. Questions or comments? You see what I mean about the twist of these books, Ezra and Nehemiah? And we'll have 3 of these. We'll have 2 in Ezra and 1 Nehemiah, where things look great, right? And then crash to the ground, right? And so that's where we are here with one of these crashes. Now, we read Zechariah and Haggai, or not all of them, but little parts of them last week. And we saw that they were admonishing the people, and the parts that we were reading last week, I was reading in reference to the people lamenting over the size of the temple, essentially. It's not what the old temple used to be. And so we got a little bit of taste of Zechariah and Haggai. They're the prophets of the day. And basically what we're going to see in the beginning of chapter 5 is they're saying, go, go, go. Build it. Go, go, go. And they are God's cheerleaders, if you will, to get people moving back in right order. I think we might have enough time to cover this whole chapter here. And then next week we'll start in chapter 6. So now the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. And Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Yeshua, the son of Jozadak, arose and began to rebuild the house of God that is in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. At the time, Tattenai, the governor of the province beyond the river, and Shetnai and their associates came to them and spoke to them thus: Who gave you a decree to build this house and to finish this structure? They also asked them this: What are the names of the men who are building this building? But the eye of their God was on the elders of the Jews, and they did not stop them until the report reached Darius, and then an answer he returned by letter concerning it. So it stops for essentially 15, 16 years, and then you have Zechariah and Haggai saying, build it, build it, build it anyhow, build it anyhow, go, go, go. In the meantime, we no longer have Artaxerxes as king, the king who stopped the building, but instead, Darius is our king now. And so we've got a new reign. Now this is interesting. I love this part of the story. And you can see we're building for another positive, aren't we? And then we'll end with another, But they say, who gave you who commanded you to build this? And what are your names? Now, we read there at verse 6, I believe it was, verse 5 rather, that God's eye was upon them. What we have in the next several chapters really is a matching of wits. One side makes a chess move, the other side reacts, and they're trying to outwit one another. But in actuality, it's not Zerubbabel and Yeshua outwitting anyone, is it? It's God taking control of these situations. So we'll see what their response is here. This is a copy of the letter that Tataniah, the governor of the province beyond the river, and Shetnaboznai and his associates, the governors who were in the province beyond the river, sent to Darius the king. They sent him a report in which was written all the follows. To Darius, king, all peace. Be it known to the king that we went to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God. It was being built with huge stones and timbers is laid in the walls. This work goes on diligently and prospers in their hands. Then we asked those elders who spoke to them thus, who gave you a decree to build the house and to finish this structure? Now, here's the part that I was saying is really neat. This is their response. So the attorneys essentially are saying to Darius, here's what we said to these people. Who told you to do this, and what are your names? Verse 10. We also asked them their names for your information, that we might write down their names of their leaders. And this was their reply to us. You ready for their names? What if this was how we responded? That who do you think you are? Or what's your name? We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth. And we are rebuilding a house that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and finished. But because our fathers had angered the God of heaven, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried away the people of Babylon. However, now notice, so they responded, didn't they? What's their names? We're the servants of the Most High God, the God of heaven and earth. Now they're going to give an answer who told them to build it. 13. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, Cyrus king made decree that this house of God should be rebuilt. And the gold and silver vessels of the house which Nebuchadnezzar was taking out of the temple that was in Jerusalem was brought into the temple of Babylon. These, Cyrus, the king, out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered to one named was Shelzbazzar, whom he had made governor. And he said to him, take these vessels, go and put them in the temple that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt on its site. Then this Shelzbazzar came and laid the foundations of the house of God that is in Jerusalem, and from that time until now it has been in building, and it is not yet finished. Therefore, if it seems good to the king, let search be made in royal archives there in Babylon, and see whether there is a decree, whether a decree was issued by Cyrus king for the rebuilding of this house of God in Jerusalem. And let the king send us his pleasure in this matter. So, there once again, who are you? We're servants of the God of heaven and of earth. Who told you to build this? They show a lot of wisdom here, don't they? They don't say Zechariah and Haggai told us to build it, even though we were commanded by Artaxerxes the king not to. If they'd have Googled Artaxerxes' commandment or decree, they would have found that. But what do? They say, go back and Google Cyrus's decree. And hence it is found. And chapter 6, we will get into Darius's decree and And again, we're going to end with the Passover feast there. Very much by design. Keep that in mind. We've been talking about that second Exodus story. It's going to culminate this part of the book, 1 through 6, which is the first section of these books, is going to culminate with the keeping of the Passover. Questions or comments? Thank you very much.